right, thank you. And let me share my screen. You guys see my screen now? Okay, cool. So let's start the session. Hello, everyone. This is Amit, and I'll be discussing EC2 with you today, right? So what is EC2, how it is related to AWS Cloud, and things like that. And a little bit of demonstration, taking you through how you can create EC2 instances, right? So again, I'm Amit. I'm based out of Bangalore in India, and I have around 19 years of experience. So yeah, pretty old in this profession, right? So we'll talk about EC2 for next 30 to 35 minutes. Then we will have some Q&A, and then we'll wrap up the session. This session is going to be recorded and shared with you, yeah, once the recording is available. All right. So let's quickly start the session without wasting any more time. EC2, what is EC2? EC2 is Elastic Compute Cloud. So ECC, that stands for E, C, and C is twice. So EC2. This is a service provided by AWS, right? What is AWS? AWS is Amazon Web Services. Right? Amazon Web Services provides you Elastic Compute Cloud, right? Which is EC2. Now, what is Elastic Compute Cloud? What is Amazon AWS Services? I'm sure you guys already know, but let me just add that information as well. It's a public cloud offering, right? It's a public cloud provider. So it's a cloud provider, AWS, which provides you public cloud features for public cloud offerings like virtual machines, storage, network, and managed services as well, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to take a look at EC2 offering of AWS. We will understand what it is, how it works, and what are its many configurations and all that you can use. And we'll end it with a small demo and some Q&A. Right. So let's say you are in a team and you want to develop software. You would like to have some virtual machines, some low-powered virtual machines for cheap tasks, and some high-powered virtual machines for very, very resource-intensive tasks like rendering of 3D images or things like that. So how would you have set up this infrastructure so that you can get those machines for your use case? So let's say you are a team of some people and you are working on a project and you want virtual machines, right? You want desktops, laptops, whatever. Now there are two ways. Either you can buy them. So you buy some desktops or buy some cutting edge servers, rack them, and then start using them. Or what you can do is you can rent them, right? By rent, I mean rent from the cloud provider. Buying a piece of hardware is very cheap in long run if you are using it extensively every day. So if I buy a laptop today and I use it every day for 2-3 hours for the next couple of years, it's going to be very good value of money for me, right? But if I have to just use the laptop for a month, and that is 1 hour per day, then it doesn't make sense to buy a laptop worth 100, 200,000 just to use it for few hours for a few months, right? So it makes sense to rent. But how can you rent servers? So what you can do is you can pay some money to the cloud provider, right? Like AWS or Azure, get their subscription, and you can yourself create virtual machines or servers, use them, and then once you are done using them, you can delete them, right? So it's all pay and use. You create a VM, use it for half an hour, delete it. You need a system which has 32 gigs of RAM, 8 CPU, 1 TB of disk, NVIDIA GPU. You can get anything that you want and then get rid of it once you are done, right? Just give me a second. Right, sorry about that. So you can create some temporary virtual machines, and once you're done using them, you can delete them, right? So I'm going to show you how you use it using AWS. So if you let's see if I have the AWS log in somewhere, right? So if you go to aws.amazon.com, you can read all about AWS, what services it offers and things like that, right? So for example, you can go to products and see if you subscribe for AWS, what are the things that you can pay and use, right? So a lot of services that it provides. You can create databases on AWS, right? You can create um, a MySQL database or a PostgreSQL database, or you can create SQL Server database. So you can create databases. You can create compute resources. So you can create EC2 instances, which is virtual machines. You can have Lambda functions, which is functions as service, serverless. You can have storage, so you can create some file storage, some block storage, right? And use them. So yeah, there are a lot of services. We are going to focus on EC2. So if you sign in, you can sign in for free. You can create account for free. You do require a credit card information so that if you use any services, your card will be charged. But apart from that, you don't have to do anything special. So if you log in, this is your web console for AWS. You can access AWS via your web console, or you can access via a mobile application by providing proper authentication. You can also access it via command line, right? So there are various ways to access your AWS account. I'm going to use web console because it is easy to understand and easy to demonstrate. Maybe I will also show you later how you can use command line to create an EC2 instance if time permits. Right. So let's say you want to create a virtual machine, right? You can go to services after logging in, and you will see all the services that are available to you. And there we can go to compute. And in compute, again, there are a lot of options available. Let's go to EC2. So this is EC2. This is EC2 dashboard, right? And as I said, EC2 means Elastic Container Compute Cloud, and you can use this service to create your virtual machines. So let's see what virtual machines I have right now. Virtual machines are called instances. Okay, virtual machines are called instances in terms of AWS. So different cloud providers call their resources differently. AWS calls them instances, Azure calls them virtual machines, Google Cloud calls them, I don't remember, compute instances or virtual machine, maybe something like that. I actually don't remember that. But yeah, there are different names in different cloud providers. Let's go to instances on the left side. And you can see there are no instances running. And I can launch an instance from here or from here, right? So let's say launch an instance. And there is a wizard or kind of a form that you can fill to um, to give the information about what kind of virtual machine you want. Okay. Now, before filling the form, let's understand what is required to create a virtual machine. So let's say you want to create a VM, right? A virtual machine. What information do you think is required to create it? First is your resource configuration, right? How many CPU, how much of RAM, and how much of disk, right? Then your operating system, right? Then your network. So what is network? IP address, right? And network throughput. So these things, right? What else is required? You also require, so there is also something related to network, kind of related to network is your external firewall, right? Which which acts as a filter mechanism to allow or deny incoming or outgoing network communication, right? So any communication coming to the VM will be either allowed or denied um, based on your firewall settings. So external firewalls, right? Now, in terms of these features, they are called certain terminologies in AWS. So you can choose your CPU and RAM by using a proper instance type. So in AWS, there are predefined configurations for creating VM, right? They are called instance types. And each defined configuration has certain amount of CPU, certain amount of RAM, and sometimes certain amount of disk also, and maybe a GPU if it is there, right? So if you want two CPUs, 8 GB RAM, you can choose an appropriate instance type. If you want uh, 32 CPUs, 96 GB RAM, you can use a different instance type and things like that. So if you go to this form, you can scroll down and see here instance type, right? And there are some instance type which are available for free when you create an account for certain amount of time, which is T2 micro, which has one CPU and 1 GB of memory. But if you have more requirements, you can click on this drop down and maybe you can say 8 CPU. Okay, it doesn't work like that. 8 vCPU, right? So if you look for 8 vCPU, you have these instance types. T2 2XL, T3 2XL, which is 8 CPU and 32 GB memory. If you want a smaller one, 8 CPU, 16 GB of memory, right? But again, you have to pay a price accordingly, according to instance that you choose, right? There are also 48 CPU, 96 GB memory, 8 CPU, 16 GB memory. So there are a lot of configurations available to you, right? 128 CPU, 256 GB of memory. So depending on your use cases. I'm going to stick with T2 micro. So I'm going to choose that here. Then there is disk, right? So then there is disk, and the disk is called disk. It is actually termed as elastic block storage, which is nothing but a disk device that you can connect to your VM, right? So you can choose that while creating the VM. You can choose your operating system. Now in Amazon, they are called as AMI, which is nothing but Amazon Machine Image, right? These are modified operating system images which allow them to work with AWS and its different components. So it is not plain vanilla operating system. It is an operating system plus Amazon related configurations. So you can have Ubuntu based AMI or RHEL based AMI or Mac based AMI or Windows based AMIs. So you choose your AMI. Then you can choose some network. The instance type also defines network, but there are some configurations that you can define. For example, do you want external IP address or not? Do you want high throughput, high IO network or not? So things like that. And then there is firewall, which is also known as your security group. Okay. In a security group, you can define the rules which allow or not allow certain internet communication, right? So let's do that. Now, let's say I want instance type of one CPU, 1 GB because it is free for me. I do that. Then there is Amazon machine image, right? So I can choose Amazon Linux. I can choose Mac. I can choose Ubuntu, Windows, Red Hat, SUSE, Debian, any kind of. I can have more. There are more AMIs. There are some AMIs which I can create also, which has some specific OS and then some applications on top of it, right? So I choose Ubuntu because I'm familiar with it. I choose Ubuntu. You can choose anyone that you want. And then you can choose what kind of architecture. So x86 is the general architecture. So I choose that. Then there is network settings. Am I audible, guys? Okay, cool. So then there is network settings. And in there you define some of the details of network. For example, to which subnet and to which VPC your system is connected. So in AWS, there are millions of machines created. They all need to be isolated from each other, right? So a company's virtual machine should be in their own networks and a particular team's VMs should be in their own network. So we need to segregate machines using networks. They're called VPCs, virtual private uh, virtual private, I don't know what is C, virtual private cloud. Yeah, right. So then, do we want public IP address? We can choose that. If we don't want it to be reachable from outside, then we can disable the public IP address. Then there is firewall, right? Security groups. So by default, either you can choose an existing firewall or you can create a new firewall. By default, there is a firewall which allows only SSH access. So you can choose that. Or you can create a new firewall and then you can define the rules. So the most secure rule is that you only allow SSH from some machines. You don't want to expose your application or machine to everyone. But since this is lab, we want to, make it available to everyone. So I'm going to edit this network settings, and I'll scroll down and I'll say inbound security group rules. I will change it to all traffic from anywhere should be allowed, right? So I modify my firewall to allow any kind of traffic. And then there is disk. So there is a default a chosen value of 8 GB for your system. You can modify it as much as you want. Up to 30 GB can be used across VMs for free. More than that, you have to pay. And then there are some more advanced details, which I'm going to talk about later, if time permits. Yeah, that's it. Okay. All right. So I have chosen everything. You can, on the right side, you can see summary. There is Ubuntu, T2 Micro, new security group, 8 GB of disk. And I can also choose how many such instances I need to create, right? So either 1 or 10 or 20, I can just choose whatever. I just go with 1 as of now and click on launch instance. Now, there is also another information that you have to provide. So in Amazon or in AWS, when you create a virtual machine, you want to connect to the VMs, right? Then you want to log into the VMs, to the operating system to perform some task, whatever tasks you want to perform. How do you log in? So either you can use username password via via SSH, right? But AWS AMIs, they don't allow a username password based login. So what they expect is that you should use key based login, which is also known as passwordless. What does that mean? That means you should have an SSH key pair. The public key should be here. Now, if you want to know more about SSH, you can do it later. Learn how SSH works. So you can have public key here, and you can have private key with you. Think of them as lock and key. Let's say this public key is a lock. So you can put the lock is put on the VM, and only you have the key. Is my screen visible, guys? Okay, cool. I'm not sure, some people are complaining. Okay, so you have private key, you have public key, and then you need to use that to log in via SSH. Okay, so you can upload your public keys on AWS and use them with your instances. But if you don't, then you can create a new key pair. So I click on create new pair, new key pair, and I'll say this is something like this. I'll just give it some name. So I create a key pair. Now a key pair is created. The public key is stored in AWS, and the private key is downloaded here. You see, this private key is not stored on AWS, so it is given to you. If you lose it, you cannot access this machine anymore. So don't lose this private key. Right. Okay, this is done. And now I say launch instance. Successfully initiated launch. And let's go to instances again. Let's refresh. And you see there is one instance. Now each instance gets an unique instance ID. This is actually created by AWS itself. So each instance across AWS, every instances have unique IDs. So this is my instance ID. The state is pending. That means it has not started running yet. And you see the summary of various things that you have chosen. It is now running. And you see, this is a public IP address assigned. This is a private IP address assigned. There's a public DNS, private DNS, and yeah, everything here. Right? Now, if I click on this instance, I'm very happy. I need to connect to it. So I can click on connect button here. And there are various ways to connect to instance. Either I can connect via GUI. So I can go to EC2 instance connect, click on connect. And you see your system. So it's a web-based terminal, and you can run your commands. Right? You can explore the complete system. So you got a VM when you require. Now, this is not a preferred way to connect. It's okay for debugging purposes, but it has a lot of limitations. So you may want to connect with a existing terminal, right? With your PowerShell or Bash terminal or your command prompt or wherever. So how do you connect with that? So again, we go to connect, and I'm going to close this connection. We go to connect, and then there is another option called SSH client. Okay, you can use PuTTY, you can use Windows, you can use Mac terminals, you can use Linux terminals, whatever. And then it says, we need to provide the key, the private key that was downloaded. So SSH, use the private key, this one, and Ubuntu user, and this is the public DNS of the system. So using this command, I can log in. So I can copy this command. Now my private key was downloaded in my downloads folder. So I do that, and then I say, this is the command. Right, press enter. It asks me if I trust this connection. Yes. And I'm logged in. I have access to that system. Now on EC2, when you log in, when you create an EC2 instance using normal available AMIs, you also get sudo permissions. That means you can become root and you can do whatever you want. For example, you can say apt update. And then you can install any packages that you want. Right? So for example, I can say apt install nginx. Nginx is nothing but a web server and a proxy server. So if I install nginx, I can access web applications on my system. So now I install nginx on my system, and if I get the IP address, and if I browse to this IP address, there's a web server running called welcome to nginx. Right? I can also make some changes. Maybe let's see, var www html. And you see, I created a web page which says hello from Scale Right? I can, edit it further to make it more fancy, but now you understand what I'm saying. So this is a web server that I was able to create pretty quickly. Created an instance and then created web server here. Make sense? Right. So now, if I go to my EC2 dashboard, now here I can see instances. And this is the instance that is running, right? And I can power it down. I can make some other changes. For example, I realize that, hey, um, one CPU, one RAM is not enough for me. But I have created this instance. I don't want to delete it and create a new one because there is so much data here. So can I add more CPUs? So the answer is yes, we can change the instance type of an instance, but it requires powering off. So if you select this machine, you can change the state of the instance to either restart it or stop it, or you can delete the instance by saying terminate, right? If you stop the instance will stop running, and then you can go to actions, instance settings, and then change instance type somewhere, change instance type. It is grayed out because the instance is running right now. It is in the running state. But when it is in stop state, you can change the instance type. Okay. Now that is your virtual machines, but EC2 has more than virtual machines. So instances is one part. Then there is everything related to instances. For example, you can see AMIs here. So as I said, AMIs are Amazon Machine Images. You can create your own AMIs and publish them here. Or you can look at the marketplace by going to AMI catalog and look at what AMIs are available for you. Right? You can use those. Then the disk that we attached, see, it is called Elastic Block Store, EBS. And then you can see volumes. So what are the volumes created? So you see here, there is a volume created and it is of 8 GB and it is mounted on this instance as /dev/sdu1, right? You can go to this volume. Now you cannot resize this volume. Once the volume is created, it is created. You cannot resize it. But if you want to increase the disk space on your system, you can add more volumes and mount it on your virtual machine. Right? So that's Elastic Block Store. And then there is networks. Right? So there is security groups where you can define firewall rules and attach it to your virtual machine. So you see, when we created the VM, we chose to create a new firewall and then define our own rules there. This is the firewall that was created, security group. And this has, if I go into this, it has these rules, inbound rules, which is this one. And if you see the inbound rules, you see it allows all traffic, right? You can create more rules in advance. You can create more firewalls or more security groups in advance. And when you are creating VMs, you can attach them with your firewalls, right? Then you can create load balancer. Sorry, before that, you have elastic IPs. So if you want to have a persistent IP address for a system, that means you want the same IP address to be assigned to a system all the time. You can have elastic IPs. You can have 5 elastic IPs for free, but more than that, you need to pay. So that will act as a static IP address for your machines. You can use key pairs. So I created a key pair, right? Remember, this is stored here. You can delete them, or you can create new key pairs in advance so that any new VMs can use those. You don't have to create new key pairs all the time, so you can do that. And you can attach more network interfaces, right? So there is a network interface which is associated with our VM. You can have multiple network interfaces associated with one VM or with multiple VMs. So you can do that. You can create load balancing if you are running a web server which has cluster of machines. You want to have only one endpoint for those machines. You know what load balancers are, right? So if you want to use load balancers, you can create them here. You can also scale up VMs, or also scale out virtual machines. So let's say you have two virtual machines behind a load balancer, which are serving web applications. And then you realize that, hey, two virtual machines are not enough. They are not able to take the load. So I want to automatically add three more virtual machines if the load increases. So you can create this auto scaling group, and that can increase the scale of your instances. So that's all EC2. You can also use AWS CLI to create EC2 instances. So you don't need to log in to this console, GUI and all. You can install CLI on any of the machines and then work with it, right? So let's see if I have AWS CLI installed here on my laptop, right? So I have AWS CLI installed. So you can install it and then use it. So you can install it from here, right? And then you can use it. So to use AWS CLI, you need to provide the credentials. So AWS configure is the command which will allow you to provide the credentials to log in. Now, these credentials are not your username password. These are credentials created. Think of them as access tokens, which can be created and then used for CLI operations. So let's go to our account, right? Let's go to IAM, which is Identity and Access Management. And I'm going to go to users, and this is my user. So I'm going to go to my account here, go to security credentials, and I'm going to create access keys, right? So click on access keys. I want to use it with CLI, right? And I choose this confirmation and I say next. So my access key is created and a secret key is created. Now I can give this to my AWS configure command. So AWS configure, this is my access key and then secret key. So let me copy that. This is my secret key. Done. Right? So if I run the AWS configure command again, you will see that it already has some information, and that information is already stored. That is what I provided. So it will store the information, the configuration information. And now if I run any AWS command, I can interact with my cloud account. So if I say AWS instance, so instance is not a command, right? So if I say AWS, it has to be followed by a command. Let's say, what is the command? Is it instance or instances or something else? So maybe EC2, so AWS EC2, and then let's say help. So in EC2, there are so many subcommands available. I'm looking for get, get instances maybe. So I can do my R&D and look for commands like this. So describe instances, right? I'll use that. AWS EC2 describe instances. This unauthorized operation. It's not authorized. Ah, okay. right? So I think my account does not have the permissions. I don't have the root account or admin account for this AWS account, so I cannot make those changes. But yeah, let's look at AWS list of instances. Yeah, it is describe instances, but I need permissions. So I don't have CLI execution permission, but yeah, you can see here, you can use this command and create an instance, right? You can say AWS run EC2 run instance, run instances. I can look for help for this command and it will show me what you can do here in this command, right? So all the options are here provided. Instance types and what are the parameters that you can pass, right? So AMI ID, image ID, instance type, everything can be there. Okay, so that's all I wanted to show to you. I can take any questions for next 10 minutes and then we'll wrap it up. Question, how many types of firewall are there while creating EC2 instances? So there is a firewall at the system level, VM level, which is called security group. Then there is a firewall at the virtual private cloud or VPC level also, right? So all the firewalls have to allow a net of communication for it to reach the machine. Where can we see instant flavors? Can that be changed as well? What is the instance flavor? What is the flavor? What is the preferred way to connect to instance? It is always SSH. What is the placement group and target group? So placement group, okay, let's see. Let's go here. So placement group is a group that you can define, and then you can define, um, a kind of a preferred location for your VMs to be created. There are regions and then there are availability zones. So you can define, okay, hey, this type of, if my system is, or if my VM is associated to an X placement group, then they all should go into availability zone 1 and things like that. Okay. EC2 console, SSH or CLI. To connect to instance, you should use SSH. How many security group can apply in a single EC2 instance? You can have multiple security groups for EC2 instance. And when the security group is evaluated, it will be evaluated by a combination of all. I'm not allowed to share my LinkedIn or any other contact details. Apologies for that. What is the use of VM when user is already using physical laptop, desktop? You tell me. We can't think of any use case. If you have a laptop, which is like bare minimum, and you want to compile some big software, how would you do that? Or if you are writing some machine learning or AI, you can't do that on a laptop. What security measures should we implement to ensure our AWS environment is protected? So any resource that you create should be denied by default. There should not be anyone able to log into the systems unless they are explicitly allowed. And when you follow that, then you will automatically come with highly restrictive permissions. Okay. What is the difference between VPC and security group? VPC is a private cloud. It's like a private network of all your computers. Security group is a firewall which you can apply to a VM. What is a snapshot? Snapshot is like a backup of your disk. Path for AWS certification. So if you are starting, I mean, I thought this is a common knowledge, but if you're starting with AWS, there are various paths you can take if you want to go towards DevOps, or if you want to go towards administration, if you want to go towards AI ML, so like that. If you are a software developer, then we should go for software development engineer, right? Which is, hold on a second, let me zoom in a bit. So which is mostly DevOps, right? So you should, as a developer, how would you use a cloud platform? You don't want to get into administration and all. So do a DevOps engineer course, right? But if you are going to be a system architect, right? So you need to do, for example, here, solution architect. So you need to do AWS solution architect professional, right? So you can choose which path you want to take here. The beginning is cloud practitioner foundational course. You need to do that. It's just basically introduction to AWS, but you don't need to do it. You can directly take the next level course also. Okay, for ML, there is a complete different path. So yeah, you can follow this path. Can we change our VM configuration? You can change the instance type. You cannot change the image or the operating system once you have created. What is the difference between EC2 and VM? EC2 is a VM, but on AWS with AWS configurations. Okay, so guys, thank you so much. For networking, there's a question for networking, which one should be the certification? So there is a networking certification as well. So you need to do solution architect associate, network specialty, and then if you are interested, security specialty. AWS services should be used for storing and analyzing large data set. Of course, so for large databases, you have data lake kind of services. Yeah, there is so there is Hadoop framework, right? I'm not very well versed with data lake and big data and also, but definitely there is something. All right, so you will get the recordings later. So thank you for your time and thank you for the questions. Hopefully this session was a bit informational to you and you were able to make out or get out some value from this. So thank you and take care. I'll see you in the next webinar whenever that happens. Thank you. Bye.